Hello, everybody, and welcome to the User Research Strategist podcast. I am your host, Nikki Anderson, and I am joined today by Amanda Stockwell. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Nikki. Hi, everyone.
So excited for you to be here. We're going to talk about an awesome topic that has to do with onions and research. Weirdly, like vague and mysterious. But yes, we're going to talk about some skills within the user research field. But before we get into that, Amanda, do you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yes, of course. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And yeah, so I'm Amanda Stockwell. I was doing the math this morning, actually trying to add up how many years I've actually been in research, and it's 16. So I joke that I've done every iteration of research job that has existed. And for about the last 8 years, I've been running my own user experience research and what I have been sort of calling various things, but at this point I call innovation strategy practice for about the last 8 years. And then most recently, I've become a part-time professor, which is part of what inspired this conversation.
Yeah, I also know that you share lobster facts, so I'm going to have to ask you at the end about that. But first, we will
Oh,
get
yeah.
to.
I am a wealth of knowledge about both UX and crustaceans. So,
I think we will have to dig into that after we dig into like this weird intersection between onions and user research. So, actually, I wanted to start this conversation off by the fact that you have been part-time teaching, and we talked a little bit about you talking to grads and non-research people and the skills that they really need to succeed in research, like outside of that core, this is where the onion came from, user research
yes.
craft skills. So, let's kind of talk through, okay, we have this core of the craft, but what are the other layers of skills that people should think about, both in transitioning to user research and even in already being in user research that are important to succeed?
Yeah, absolutely. So the next layer that I think about, and I recommend this to people in research, people in design, I just recommend this.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think that I started doing without realizing that this was separate from the research role. But as I have been in lots more spaces and seen lots of other ways that teams work, I've realized that it's not something that either people know to do or they get told not to do, or they just never know that it should be a part of their brain. But a conversation that is happening all the time has been since I started a long time ago in UX is the business side of things, right? And so understanding the business context and being able to thread the user side of things and the business side of things and really being able to sort of be what I call a reasonable advocate, right? Like a feasible advocate. Of course, we want the users to be at the center of what we're building and what we are pursuing. But we live in the real world where there are technical constraints, there are budget constraints, there are time constraints, and you are much more effective if you can understand the context within which you are presenting recommendations and cognizant of those things, and even ideally have conversations with the various people on your teams, or whether you work internally or as a consultant, and can thread all of those things together so that you can make practical, implementable recommendations from the get-go. Because research a lot of times sort of has the reputation of being slow and too blue sky, right? Like, of course you could recommend rainbows and kitty cats and unicorns, right? But like realistically, we can build red, orange, and yellow.
Yeah.
That's all we got.
Yeah.
Like, so being able to, and this the same thing goes for design, right? Like I know I've had lots of conversations recently, especially with AI. It wouldn't be 2024 in podcasting if we didn't mention AI at all. Um, like especially with all of the advances in tools and technology, of course the craft is still important, but it's a lot easier to fake the craft now than it's ever been. So being able to understand what you're recommending in the context within which you're recommending it and work like really closely collaborating, not just like having one whiteboarding meeting, but actually collaborating with various different members of your either team's decisions or organization, however that works in the context of how you work, And when I say collaboration, like I said, I don't just mean like you send somebody something for a review or you get them to sign off on it before you move ahead. It's like truly understanding what open questions do you have? Why are those questions the most valuable for you to learn right now? What risk is associated? And that sort of framing has also led me to something that I think has made me a lot of times the most successful is that I look at my research work as a way to make my colleagues feel better and look good. So if I can answer a question for you that helps you more confidently make a decision or us more confidently make a decision, then we all win. And then it removes a lot of the conversation we often hear about of like UX versus product or design versus engineering, or there's a lot of tensions that don't need to be there, but are often because of, well, a lot of things. A huge one of them being ego, but if you like, I would rather say, I don't know, let's figure it out together, and then have us all collectively make the best decision for the organization and the user together for a sustainable ongoing future. And as someone who has worked with an awful lot of startups, most of whom you don't know who they are because they failed after X amount of time. And I would have rathered that I was wrong about something and we course corrected together and they were now abundantly successful, right? Like everyone on the team would prefer that to be true. And I think you can only, and there's lots of reasons that startups fail. So don't take that to mean that like, I could have saved them. I couldn't
No.
probably have in those cases, but being able to, from the research perspective, understand what are the market influences of what's happening right now. How much cash does our company have? What can we realistically do? How big is our team? What is our output? How quickly realistically could we build a solution,
Yeah.
for that sort of problem? And it all kind of goes back to, are we solving the right problems? But I would say that that's even sort of like too limited of a view for the true business context onion ring that I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I love that because what you said about I am here to help somebody make a better decision or to help somebody else be more confident or look good. And I truly do agree that user research is such a support system. Like we talk about foundational research, we are building a foundation for people to stand upon. And it's not, it's sometimes sad because I've been in it too, where we forget that we're all on the same team, that we're all for the same organization, trying to make everybody, everything better, including for the user. So I really, really like that mindset and that ring of really thinking about, okay, how do I get into the kind of mind or an understanding of the business and of my teams and how I can help support them with their decision making.
Yeah, and just like, we're not going to expect a product manager to be an expert in all of the different research methods
Yeah.
or data analysis methods. That doesn't mean that you need to be an expert in market analysis or product management or marketing or the other things, but it means you at least need to be building relationships and having conversations and considering who is even the right person to ask about this thing in my organization or on the project that I'm working with. The best part of research is you don't have to know anything, or
I know.
well, you don't have to know any of the answers, right? Like you just have to know how to get the answers. And it's just like you don't want someone who's not a research expert trying to run and plan all of your research. I'm not suggesting, also to be very clear, like I'm not suggesting necessarily that researchers all like do business strategy or play the product management role. If you're into that, great. But I just want to be clear about like the distinction, because sometimes when I have that conversation with people, I see the sort of like blank stare and or get the pushback of, well, that's not my job. That's not what I want to be doing. I like doing research. And I understand that. Me too. That's why I've been doing it for so long. But you have to be at least aware of who to talk to.
Do you want to get all of your user research questions answered all while hanging out on your couch in sweatpants. No need to join any live webinars and hope that your question gets answered. No need to Google a million different things and sift through some scattered advice that you don't really know is valid or reliable. Not anymore. I know it sounds too good to be true, but I promise it isn't, because if you become a paid Substack subscriber, you get access immediately to a community filled with user researchers that I am in every single day answering questions. Not only can you hang out on your couch, feel less alone as a user researcher, and get all of your questions answered, not only by an expert, but by a bunch of other user researchers with amazing perspectives and experience, you can do all of that on your couch in sweatpants. And I will be alongside there with you every step of the way. So join my paid Substack, get immediate access, and we can relax together solving all of your user research problems. See you there. Something that I tried to do and help others do when you get that feeling of like, but it's not my job, is like, well, put your research mindset to it. Like, because you said we don't need to necessarily know the things, but we need to know how to get it. And that's by asking questions. So, like, yeah, continuing on with like, okay, research the stakeholders, research the business, like try and put that hat on. And like, even if it's not your thing, try and get into it as much as you can by getting curious about it.
Yeah, or at least to your point, be curious about the people whose
Mhm.
thing it is, right? And that sort of leads me to the next layer of things, the next onion layer, which I don't think is specific to research, but I think is more important in research than in some other disciplines, which is community and connection building. Um, Everyone I know in research who has any measure of any kind of success had to do it in a team and with other people. You cannot be like a completely solo, locked in a box on your own kind of a person in research. You just can't do that. But there is a big difference between being willing to have some conversations and being an actually effective collaborator and networker. And they are different things.
Yeah, I'd love to dive into like, okay, I'm a solo user researcher who's stuck maybe in a box. How do I start to be an effective collaborator and an effective networker and build that or find that community?
Yeah, so let's they are since they are a little bit different, let's talk about first sort of like the collaboration piece because that's the
Yeah.
most natural segue from before, and then I'll touch on the networking bit too. But even if you are the only researcher, and by the way, I am often in that space, right? Very often, especially now as a consultant, a lot of my clients hire me. Sometimes they have a research team and there's just a gap to fill, but very often they are organizations who are maybe that not mature in UX, or maybe don't think of themselves as a UX or product organization, but they recognize a need to answer some kind of question.
Yeah.
So in those spaces, I'm very often in that space, and I've worked as the only researcher in an in-house space as well. But again, kind of going back to understanding all of the other parts of the business and all of the other decisions that need to get made. And this sounds so simple and so overrated, but make friends. Like go out to lunch with your product manager, go on a coffee break with the designers on your team, spend time not in meetings with the engineers, bribe them if you have to. I often tell the story of how at one office that I worked at that was very large and a little bit intimidating for me, and I had come from a really small startup culture. I was in a big corporate environment, and we would have these debrief meetings after research, and it was felt at first like pulling teeth to get people there. I have a hack for that. Now, this may not work for everybody, but we had a toaster oven in our area, in our office area. I like to bake, and I would make banana bread and cook it like 3/4 of the way through at home, and then stick it in the toaster oven in the break room
So smart.
and make the whole area smell like delicious baked goods. And people would wander by and be like, what's going on? Is it someone's birthday? Is there an event today? Are we having a party? And I'd say, yeah, we're having a research debrief. You can totally have like the banana bread will be ready at 3 just in time. Come to the meeting.
Magic. Yeah.
Yes. And I mean, obviously, like I'm being a little bit silly about it, but you know what? A lot of people came. And they came for the banana bread and stayed for the insight, to be fair. Like that would only get them in the door. It won't help them stay if you're not organized, if you can't lead a real conversation, that kind of thing. But it's it's that kind of thing of taking the initiative to make those connections happen because they will not find you, especially now where so many people work remotely, so many people work in hybrid situations. Even if you're in an office, you are likely to be collaborating with people in other places. It's taking the initiative to make connections with people. And again, sort of reinforcing that I'm here as part of this team to help us answer the stuff that we don't already know. We have people who can better answer questions about the technology. I haven't done any coding in a long time and on purpose, right? So like kind of frankly, same kind of with visual design. Like I haven't done much design work in a long time and on purpose because I would rather work with people who love those things and can answer all of the questions. But I'm here to answer these other questions that you two don't know, or whoever else is in the room at the time.
Yeah.
And so taking the initiative internally to find and make connections. And by the way, that's not saying you have to be best friends. That's not saying you have to socialize outside of work. You're not compelled to go to happy hour, but finding a little bit of human connection with the people that you need to make work decisions with, or that it would be helpful for you to have their input or their insight on things, learn their name,
Yeah.
learn a little bit about where they're coming from. What are they afraid of? And not in like a super deep level, but like in their workspace, like what challenges are they facing right now? How can, with that understanding, how can you craft your approach to them? And it's just like, I mean, I say this all the time, but it's just like how you would craft a design, like
Yeah.
an interface design for a user base. Craft your meeting design for the audience of who you want to be there, right? Craft your collaboration workspaces around who you need the most input from at that time. And sometimes that can be more general, like, are you in a room with a marketing team or a design team? Those might have kind of different spaces, but it also very likely comes down to personally knowing a little bit about the people in the room because just like all users aren't the same, all marketing people aren't the same, all engineering people are not the same, right? Like, and we say this ad nauseum about our users, but we don't always apply it to the way that we interact with our colleagues. So that sounds kind of obvious, but it's also obvious how many people skip that when you, especially when you start consulting and you start being invited to other teams meetings and other like, and to be fair, I have worked at two-person startups and I have worked at the largest like Fortune 100 companies. This is not a problem that is specific to any organization size or UX maturity. This is universal.
Yeah. I love that. I love your banana bread story as well. I'm a huge proponent of that. I used to bring candy, there was pizza, there was
Yeah.
beer and wine, like for like Friday workshops. I was like, let's get pizza and beer. And people were like, yeah. I was like, cool.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, the pizza isn't
Yeah.
going to get them, for instance, to drive into the office if they weren't already planning to be there that day or
Yeah.
something. But if they have the option of continuing to work at their desk or coming to this meeting, a little food and drink greases the wheels.
Yeah. Yeah. But I really like take the time to find those personal connections because you're right. Like it does make a huge difference if you understand how people digest information differently, how people like to see information displayed or how they understand things. I always ask people like, hey, do you like visual learning? Are you a word person, an auditory person? Like because all those things, if you show people you care, people are more likely to care. And that's like part of that collaborative effort.
Yeah, 100%. That's such a good example. So I get asked all the time, and I know you have like a bunch of templates, which are great, but people ask me all the time, like, oh, well, how do you do research reports? And this is my favorite answer for everything. Sorry. It depends,
Yes.
right? Like, and even the exact same kind of client, kind of project. Well, if I happen to know that Jane likes visuals and is like a very visual learner and needs to see things visually, well, then I will craft a deck that way. But if I'm working with Joe and I know that he would prefer narrative, in fact, he would rather see a list of bullet points and recommendations. Well, great, then that's what I'm going to do because for me, it's not about how pretty can I make my presentations, right? Or whatever. It's about how do I effectively communicate. And unfortunately, we human beings are, in a lot of ways, we have a lot of similarities, but we are all little weirdos in our own little way. And we all have different ways of processing information, different things we care about at that exact moment, and different goals that we're trying to get out of things. So that is a very long-winded way of saying apply the same rules about how you would cater and craft something to your audience as your colleagues as you would to your audience as a user.
I love that. And so that's the more collaboration side of that, is really like thinking about your audience and being intentional and thoughtful about them as you would users. Now, what about that networking side? Because they are slightly different. We talked
Yeah.
about you don't have to go and socialize and do your happy hour and be BFFs with everybody at work. That's not how you have to do it. But like, then what does that networking side look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this again, this is not something that I think is specific to UX, but I think that is especially important in UX and in the networking space is finding a way to do it that feels authentic to you.
Hey everyone, I have been taking some business courses recently and am launching a new membership that's all about how user researchers can become more business savvy, more strategic, and more of a business partner in their organizations. One of the biggest questions that I get asked is, hey, my organization isn't really mature. It has like a low user research maturity level. Please do not let the maturity of your organization dictate your user research career. That's what I did because I was in a lower user research maturity. I kind of let myself stagnate and I didn't really learn new things. And with that, my skills kind of like deteriorated. I lost a lot of time that I could have used to learn really, really important skills because they weren't necessarily applicable to my organization at that time. But guess what? I got fired. And then it didn't really matter what maturity level my organization was at because I was no longer there. And I wished that I had taken the time to learn some of these skills because they would have been applicable at the next places that I went into. I know that it can be hard sometimes and frustrating when you're in a low maturity organization and you want to push things, you want to learn new things, but please, please, please don't let your current organization and their levels of maturity impact your future career because I promise you, you will not be there forever and you will need the skills that you need to learn in the future. Promise, 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 especially with the user research industry changing and us hopefully moving into that more strategic space and operating more as business partners and innovation partners to our organizations. Also, if you want more details on my membership and how to become a little bit more business oriented as a researcher, check out the link that I have. And I hope that helps.
So there are a lot of different ways to network, especially now. There's both pros and cons of all of the sort of digital ways to connect with people. But rather than chasing the latest platform or slapping the latest hashtag on whatever you're writing or looking to fit some trend you're seeing, I try to find sort of like authentic ways to connect with people. And also remember that even if ultimately you want something from them, right? Like you want a job or you want an introduction to someone else or you want whatever. Again, sort of that same thing of like looking for a personal, authentic connection, but then also looking for a way that you can provide as you are or even before you are asking for anything. So, and that's not groundbreaking marketing, like that's something that's pretty well known, but I think people get sort of overwhelmed a little bit when it comes to networking and especially and this is my other tip, which is do it all the time, even when you think you're too busy, because you never know when a connection that you made 6 years ago is going to turn into a podcast, right? Or so I'll give an example. This past week, I was visiting Paris and I was doing some other stuff, but I had a little bit of free time and I went on LinkedIn and searched for who I knew that was currently located in Paris. And one of them was someone I know through a Slack group had met one time at an event. Literally, that was our connection.
Yeah.
We don't actually know, like, none of the people involved actually know each other, but we made the connection on LinkedIn. She happened to have some time on the day that I had some time. We had coffee and it was so lovely. And we identified that we're kind of in a similar space in our careers, and it's pretty likely that we might collaborate in the future. But I never could have known that from the first time I joined the Slack group
Yeah.
and then made connections with people, right? So you never know where that is going to fit. And you also cannot look at it as a like one in, one out sort of situation. So a couple of things because I've been sort of all over the place. But so when it comes to like networking, when you're not necessarily talking about like people you're actively collaborating with at the moment, and I want to reiterate that the reason that this is so important, and it happens to be especially true right now because the UX job market is not great. But I've been around for a long time and I started UX work in 2008 when things were also not great. So I've seen some ups and downs and some different things. But the number one thing is like make sure that you're making connections and keeping them up over time, because if you start trying to make connections when you need something, it's too late. It's going to take you a long time to build a real connection with someone, build some authentic interaction, and really kind of understand what could I provide? What can they provide without looking at it transactionally?
Yeah.
So one, kind of be doing it all the time and be prepared for it to sometimes you'll meet someone and like almost immediately they'll have a project need and that works out and that's great. But that's happened to me like maybe two or three times. What has happened to me dozens of times is someone I sat next to one time at a lunch at a conference gets a new job and then tells their friend at their new job, who then gets another new job and happens to know like need something, and 6 years later that's when it happens or whatever, right? Like that kind of stuff happens to me pretty frequently. The immediate connection and need fit usually does not. So making sure you're doing it regularly and making sure that you're staying in touch with people in an authentic way. This is again not like marketing genius. This is pretty well documented, but doing things like, well, for instance, now I know that you love Maine, which is where I'm originally from. Now I'm probably when I keep up with you, I'm probably going to send you pictures of Maine, right? Because now I know that like that's a thing that you enjoy. And it's that kind of small connection stuff that makes you memorable, that makes you relatable, and that makes you have an authentic connection. And then that last piece that I was talking about is what can you offer as well as what are you looking for? So, and it does not matter if you are very early in your career, you always have something that you can offer. So try not to look at networking as, even though I just said, look at what you can offer, try not to look at as transactional. Try to look at it as how can we help each other? And maybe the way that somebody can help you is a job offer, and maybe the way that you can help is repost theirs. They don't have to be of equal weight, but there's always something that you can offer. And one thing that I say, especially to folks who are newer, is, like volunteer at an event. You don't have to know anything to set up chairs. Like you don't have to be experienced to set up the meetup group or whatever. And I will also say, because I organize a local ladies at UX meetup and I help with a couple of other events, that being involved in events, if you're someone who maybe isn't super outgoing or feels a little bit uncomfortable at those things, having an event to work around and to talk about gives you some structure to have an excuse to reach out to people, right? Or an excuse to post about things or that kind of thing. I do just want to also say I think we're a little bit over the hump, but there's the very slim double-edged sword of just because you can say something or you have a hot take does not mean that you need to publish it. You can even type it out, save it as a draft, maybe think on it for a day before you hit publish because the internet is forever.
Yeah.
Just want to remind everyone of that, especially given the world right now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's a really important thing. There are a lot of things that I have wanted to post but haven't posted, right? Or wanted to post, then read it over, thought about it, decided not to, or tweaked it in a way that felt a little bit better. Because yeah, it is post with a lot of thought and intention.
Yeah, and that's not to say, by the way, that you can't take a stand about something that
Oh
you
yeah,
care
right.
about or engage in a healthy debate. You just have to be cognizant of what is the healthy part of the debate and what is just debating.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that actually goes back to your point of like, how is it helping? Right. So, like, if you are going to engage in a debate, or if you are going to take a stand on something like that you care about deeply or that you have thoughts on, like, how is it helping to support others in the field? How is it helping to like move something forward? So, always trying to like, and like, or how is it helping you to like structure your thoughts in a way that can help others? Right. So, always thinking about that, like, to what service to, or
Yeah,
to what does this
to
service?
what end? And
Yeah.
if the what end is just to enter the conversation, that's okay.
Yeah.
But being intentional about what that end is and thinking through before you just fire off like,
Yeah.
I think you're wrong,
Yeah.
right? Or that's dumb. Okay, well, why is
Yeah.
that
And
dumb,
what
right? And
else? Yeah.
and by the way, having been on the receiving end of that's dumb sort of a post, that's not helpful,
Yeah.
right? And I know I personally like I have debated and sometimes I have done this. Sometimes I re-engage and I literally say like, "Well, can you tell me more about
Yeah.
that? Why do you feel that
Exactly.
way?" Because if you really feel that strongly enough to call me out on the internet, then maybe I have something to learn. But if you
Yeah.
just say that's dumb, which I mean, obviously it was more nuanced than that, but if you say it, the variation of that's dumb,
Yeah.
you don't contribute to anyone
Yeah.
learning anything. You just make someone feel bad. And I think that is, I'm hoping we have gotten a little over the hump of that, but I still see it happening all the time. And I just want to remind you that that doesn't help you either.
No, doesn't help anybody.
It doesn't help anyone, but if you're trying to for it to help you, it's not.
Yeah.
So
No, no.
yeah.
Amanda, we're like out of time, which
Oh
is
my
just,
gosh,
I
I'm
know.
sorry.
No, I'm just like, I want more onions and more thoughts. And
I'll talk with you again if you want.
yeah.
We can dive deeper. I feel like I've been talking around a lot of things, but
No, no, it's been so super helpful. But I'd love to end with your favorite lobster fact because we had to come back to that.
you have to. Okay, well, so for context, one of my first jobs was at an aquarium in Maine, where I'm from. And I used to have to, we called them the lobster talks twice a day. We would present to the general public, whoever was in the aquarium, general facts about lobsters. So I take a lot of things, and my dad was a commercial fisherman, as was my brother when I was younger. So I take a lot of things for granted about crustaceans. But I think a good one to a good basic lobster fact is that by the time a lobster is large enough to be legal to eat, at least in the United States, they have probably shed their exoskeleton like 3 to 5 times and they're around 7 years old.
Oh, cute. Well, I don't want to eat them, but yeah.
Well, well, if that's your
Cute.
thing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I love that.
And actually, wait, I have another great lobster fact. The reason that they have rubber bands on their claws is not for you to not get pinched. It's because they are cannibals. And if you put them in a tank together, they will eat each other. I know.
I had no idea about that. That is
Yeah.
hilarious.
You you can. Also, here's an additional lobster fact. You can hold them by the back, which is called the carapace, and cross their claws in front of them, and it disengages their ability to open their claws. So
Wow.
you can safely hold a lobster with no rubber bands from the back and cross their claws in front.
Oh my gosh. So many. We got so many lobster
I
facts.
know,
Everybody's
I
going to be like
told you.
lobster experts.
Next time I'll give you the full
Yeah, yeah,
presentation. I can
yeah,
get a trap and a full lobster to show
yeah.
you.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Amazing. Well, Amanda, thank you so much. This was such a great conversation. I'm so happy we were able to do this. There's so much great knowledge and information in this. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, Nikki, thank you so much for having me. And thanks everyone for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you to all the wonderful listeners, and we'll see you again soon.